welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. And as Betsy said, I spend a lot of time evaluating children with speech and language concerns, at least, and I also work on a developmental team. So seeing children with all kinds of neurodevelopmental problems, autism, as well as other concerns. So I'm going to talk today about what is a little bit about what is normal speech and language development, but I'm also going to try to really focus on things you can do to get your kids talking. A lot of it will focus on children birth to 3, but I'm also going to have some strategies for what I call older children, for 3 and 4-year-olds, preschoolers, to help with their speech and language development as well. And typically the questions that I get from parents at the workshops that we do at the library, I get a lot of questions about children, if they're talking as much as they should, how to increase their vocabulary, what you can do to get them talking, and also a lot of parental concerns around their articulation or pronunciation. Those are probably the main things, but I can answer questions about a wide variety of things. I'm also going to talk a little bit about screen time and technology with kids. And Betsy specifically asked me about the effect of masks and COVID and social distancing on speech and language development. So I'll say a little blurb about that as well. And I'm going to put up a little PowerPoint. I know if you're watching on or listening on your phone, you might not be able to see it, but it'll help me stay on track. So I will also do that. So let me just share my screen here with you, and I will start. So Betsy has entitled this "Talk to Me, Baby," and that is sort of the title of my talk today. So when we're talking about communication with kids, we're talking about more than just how they produce sounds or the number of words that they use. Really we're talking about how they understand, how they communicate. So that includes several areas. So first of all, receptive language. We're looking at that. We're talking about how well the child understands familiar words, instructions and questions, gestures, just how well they're understanding what we're saying to them. With expressive language, that's sort of what we traditionally think of as language, but it's how they're expressing what they want and need with their words or their gestures. It's their vocabulary, and as they get older, their sentence use, their grammar. But there is more, and so we're also looking at a child's social language, and their social communication is really the foundation for language. So that's their ability to tell people what they need, communicate that in some way, and interact and engage with others. So that includes their gesture use, their facial expressions, eye contact, all of those nonverbal communication pieces that are really so important to their communication. And then we also look at, of course, articulation, their use of speech sounds, their speech clarity, and fluency and voice, which I'm not going to go into a lot today, but I can certainly address any questions that you have about that. Fluency is if the child is stuttering or not speaking fluently, and then their voice quality. So I am going to go just a little bit into what is normal. And there's a very nice website that has developmental milestones with speech and language, what to expect with comprehension and social communication. And Molly is going to attach that on there. It also has a tracker that you can use for your child's speech and language. So that's really nice as well. But let me just give you sort of some highlights first of all. So if we go back and sort of look at a 12-month-old, they're going to be doing some things like they should be recognizing their name. They should be understanding no, for sure. And some other simple commands, like if you put your arms out and say, can you come here and hold out your arms? They should be able to understand simple things like that with your arms out, or give it to me, hold out your hand and ask the child to give you something. They should be able to do that. They should have some precursor skills such as babbling. So they probably for several months have been babbling with sounds, ba, 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 da, 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 practicing with the sounds. And they should start to use some gestures such as shaking their head for no, or pointing or reaching, some gestures like that to communicate. Also, we're really looking in a little 12-month-old for some eye gaze. Like, are they checking in with you? Are they checking in with their parents, looking at something and looking back at their parents if something's scary? Are they using joint attention? So if they see something that they really like, they look at that object and look back at their parents. So we're looking for those things in a 12-month-old. Once the child gets a little older than that, they're going to sort of plod along with their language development and maybe add a word a week to their vocabulary, 3 to 4 words a month to their vocabulary. That seems kind of slow to a parent, but it really adds up quickly. So by the time they're 18 months, we're hoping to see 10 to 20 words, up to maybe 30 words at times. What they understand should be more consistent with following instructions, understanding familiar routines, going and getting an object from another room for you when you ask it. They still might need you to use gestures to help them understand. Go get your shoes, go give this to daddy. Maybe you're pointing as you give them the instructions, but they may still need that. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen just for a minute. There's another real interesting milestone with kids that they should be doing. By 16 months, they should be using 16 gestures. Now that seems like a lot. When I first heard that I could hardly think of 16 gestures. But really, when you're thinking of reaching, pushing things away, waving, clapping, nodding, yes, nodding, no, pointing, reaching, all those types of gestures, that gesture use is really important. So again, they should still be using eye gaze and sort of looking at you, combining that with when they use their gestures and communication. So they hit 18 months, and as they get a little bit older, within the next few months, all of a sudden their language just takes a big jump. And usually around 20 months, it just takes off and they start adding maybe a word a day to their vocabulary. It just takes a zoom. So by the time they're 2, you're going to have sometimes a child with 200 words in their vocabulary. They may be combining words, or we're sort of looking for them to start doing word combinations, simple word combinations. They can name pictures, and they know the names of a lot of familiar objects. They recognize familiar objects. They're understanding more consistently instructions. By 2, parents should be able to understand. Well, parents should always be able to understand almost all of their kids' speech. So by 2, parents, we want them to understand 80% of it. Other people, though, may not understand. They may only understand half, because it's very context dependent, and parents always know what their kids are talking about, but other people may not. Their speech is not very clear yet. So it continues to develop very rapidly after 2, and it may double by about age 2.5. People should be understanding it more easily. They're starting to use things like plurals and nouns and verbs, more action words. They can answer some simple questions and using more short sentences. And then again, it'll continue to sort of really blossom by the time they're 3. And then you're sort of looking at some simple little conversations, answering questions. They can tell you little simple stories and convey ideas more easily. They may have 1,000 words in their vocabulary if you sat and counted them. By 3, we would want a friend or an unfamiliar listener to understand 75 to 80% of a child's speech, and the parents at least 80 to 90%. And by 4, we definitely want that to keep increasing to where a parent should understand almost everything their child says, and other people should understand maybe 90% of the time. At 4, they're going to be using a little longer sentences, at least 4 to 5 words. they're going to be doing things like what if, or I hope this. They're using more complex sentences and more complex concepts. And they're going to understand shapes, colors, those kinds of concept words as well. So a little bit later in the presentation, I am going to talk more specifically about specific sounds that I would like kids to be using at different ages. So I'll do that just a little bit later. Keep in mind, there's a huge wide range of what is normal in speech and language development. And, you know, within a 6-month range, it can all be normal. So you might see a child at 18 months that only has 10 words. You might see a child at 18 months who has already taken that Zoom and they have 100 words. So a lot of it's normal. And if a child is really, you know, in some cases, they're really working on their motor development and they're really taking jumps and making gains in their motor skills. So their speech and language might take a little plateau for a while. So there's a lot of reasons why they might not be making all the progress that you think they should at that time. So the next thing I really want to talk about is some things you can do to maximize a child's learning. So I'm going to share my screen again here. Hold on. So the first thing sounds sort of like a no-brainer, but it's just so very important. So talking to your child. So we call it self-talk, first of all. Talk about what you're doing. So you're going to say, you know, oh, mommy's watering the flowers. Oh, I'm fixing some dinner. Oh, look at those beautiful clouds. So you're talking about what you're saying and what you're doing. Parallel talk is talking about what the child is doing. So you're going to go, oh, you ate all your strawberries. Oh, look at you. You're jumping, jump, jump, jump. So that's parallel talk. And what we're trying to do is make words stick. So when we're talking to our child, we're really teaching them a lot about the world. We're helping their language comprehension. We're helping their receptive language, help them understand new vocabulary, and hopefully these words stick and they'll use them. Some other things, though, that make words stick is when you use, first of all, use words in many contexts. So I have this cow up there on my slide. I don't know if you guys can all see it, but, you know, so they see a cow in their book and you tell them, oh, look at that cow. Cow says moo. You know, he lives in a barn, whatever, moo. And you make the sound cow. And then you see a cow on the milk cart and you say, oh, look, the cow is jumping. There's a cow. And then you're driving along and you see a cow in the field and you say, oh, look at the cows out there. So they learn to generalize that to all cows and separate it from other large furry animals or small furry animals. You know, oh, the cow's big, the kitty cat's little. So what it does is it builds neural connections in that child's brain. So every time you talk about a word in a different way or associate it with something or use it in a different context, it builds new neural connections so that they are more able to pull up that word the next time they want to use it, or when somebody mentions it, they understand what that word means. So it helps it stick, is how I like to say it. It helps that word stick in their brain. Let's see. So the next thing that really helps when we're trying to get our child to talk is this, and this is really hard to do as an adult, avoiding questions and commands to get them to talk. So children, you know, especially before age 3, they're often trying to establish their independence, and you have a lot of power struggles. You know, they don't want to eat their green beans, they don't want to wear their jacket. We don't want talking to be a power struggle. So what we want to do is find some other ways around really being direct with getting them to talk. So we want to avoid questions and commands. So it sounds silly to say, what's a question? But the kinds of questions that we as parents tend to ask are, what's this? What color is this? Is this a dog? Oh, milk? So intonation, just using your voice going up at the end as a question, is also like a question. So those are all questions. Commands are things like, can you say more and I'll give you some more milk? Or put the doggy in the house. Show me the cow. Say doggy. So those are sort of commands to get the child to talk. And a lot of times that is not a really effective way to get the child to talk. It makes sense to us as parents because it's like turn taking. We get an answer, we get a response. So it makes sense to us as an adult, but it's not really effective in helping a child learn. So what do we want to do instead? I'm going to go to the next slide here. So instead, what do we want to do? So instead of, can you say milk? So the child is looking at the refrigerator and going, pointing at the refrigerator, and they want some milk. So instead of going, what do you want? Or do you want the milk? You can just say milk. You can model it. Milk, you want milk. Okay, I'm going to give you some milk. Here's the cup. I'm pouring the milk. More milk. So you've said it a bunch of times. You've used a lot of intonation in your voice, which helps them focus on it. And that repetition of that word really helps it stick. You've modeled what you want them to say, and the chances of them imitating it is much greater than if you just said, can you say milk? So the other thing you can do is try giving them choices. So you can say, do you want milk or juice? And then they've got to say something. It's sort of a way to trick them into saying something. So they're going to say one or the other. So if they know that word, if they've said milk, 50 times, and they're going, then you want to be a little more direct. Can you use your words? Can you tell me I want milk, or tell me milk, please? But if they don't really have that established in their vocabulary, just model that word instead of asking them. For older children, you also sort of want to limit the questions. You can ask open-ended questions or questions that are thinking questions like, oh, look, what do you see up there? Oh, those are beautiful clouds. Wow, that one looks like a duck. So you're sort of modeling some more conversation, and you're encouraging them to engage in conversation with you. What do you think clouds are made of? That kind of thing, to get them sort of moving along. So there is research, and I made a slide of this because I think it's really important. Spontaneous imitation of words, like when you model a word and the child says it, instead of responding to commands to say words, say this, increases the chance of the child incorporating that word into their vocabulary and using that word again. So that's just confirms what we were saying. And the child in that case has to actively process what they're saying. So it builds those neural connections and once again, makes it stick. So that's what we want. We want those words to stick. So there are some other things that we can do to make speech more automatic. So I'm going to stop sharing for a minute so I can really show you some of this. And one of the ways is actions, pairing actions with speech, either a sound or a word. So sometimes what I'll do when I've got kids like young toddlers is I'll have blocks, for example. Blocks, there we go, I can get them up there now. And so every time I put one on, I'll say up, 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 or I might say more, 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 and then I knock them down, boom. And then I do it again, up, 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 boom. So that child has already paired that action of me stacking those blocks with that word up or more or whatever. So then I give them to the child, and almost every time they'll try to imitate me. They might just say or something like that. And then I throw the blocks in the box, boom, boom. Every time I say boom, and then I give it to the child, and almost every time, once again, they've paired that in their mind. It's paired with that sound, so they'll say boom, boom. And so pairing it with a word, you can do that in so many ways with sound effects. Kids imitate before they use words. So we want to get them imitating, and that's a really good way to get kids imitating. So you can push a car, boom, boom, boom. You can blow bubbles and pop the bubbles. Pop, 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 pop. You can, what else do I have here? A little bear. You can feed the bear. I don't know what I do. My spoon, but num, 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 num. The bear's sleeping. Oh, shh, bear's sleeping. Shh. So there's a lot of ways you can pair gestures or actions with sounds, and that really makes it automatic and makes that child use it. Another way to make talking more automatic is fill in the blank. So I'm going to just adjust that a little bit. So if we're saying, like, you've got a ball and you're going to go ready, set, go, and you throw it to the child, and then he throws it back. Ready, set, go. And then the next time, ready, set, and stop. And the child oftentimes will say go. That's another way to use the fill in the blank is with music and songs. You know, the wheels on the bus go, then stop after you've sung it a few times. With books, it's there's so many books that have really repetitive themes, and it's really a nice way to just make that automatic, that filling in the blank. So, you know, you got good old brown bear, what do you see? I see a red, you know, whatever. You can make it for older children, you can make it longer, you can leave out more of the phrase, and they will have to fill in with a sentence or a phrase or a, you know, a new concept that they haven't said before. So it's a really nice way to get kids to imitate a little bit more. Okay, let's see here. Okay. So imitation, I'm not going to spend much time on this slide, on this little slide here, but imitation always comes first. So imitating gestures, whatever, it always comes before they do the thing on their own. So the more you model those skills, the more out there are going to be imitated and then learn it. You start with smiling. These go from easy to harder. So then motor imitation, clapping, so big, waving, shaking their head no, even peekaboo. The next level would be vocal sounds, some of the things we talked about, vroom, meow, shh, uh-oh, and then to words. So once a child has about 25 to 30 words in their vocabulary that they use consistently, they often start to combine words. So once they're using some single words, you can start expanding what they're saying and modeling phrases or sentences. So if they say truck, you can start to say, oh, big truck, or, you know, I say juice, more juice, want more milk. So you're expanding what they say. But what I wanted to show you in this slide is if you have a child, say, who's not using words, but they are imitating motor actions, clapping, then go down a level, go back a level, go to that vocal and sound level and model a lot of sound effects and things like that with the gestures. And that's sort of that missing piece, possibly why they're not using those words. We're jumping, we're skipping a step. So that's really important. So the next thing, you library people will love this, because the next thing obviously is reading, and that's kind of a no-brainer, but that also builds new neural connections in that child's brain by giving auditory and visual input, so that increases their learning potential. They learn words in new contexts that they can't get just on everyday life. It makes it stick once again. With young children, they vary in their interest for books. I'm sure you noticed some of them like to just chew on them. Some of them like to grab it away and turn the pages themselves. So follow your child's lead and kind of do what they enjoy. Keep it really simple for young kids. So they really like things to touch with textures, those little books, doors to open. That sometimes gets them a little more interested, but don't feel obligated to read everything that's on the page. If you just want to read one word for each page or whatever, just follow your child's lead. As they get older, then gradually increase the words that you use as their interest increases. Once again, with reading, Limit the questions and the commands. What's this? What's this? What's this? Read the books and share. Use sound effects, gestures. With older children, as we were saying with the repetition can really help them learn correct grammar patterns and things like that. But a lot of books for older kids are more stories. They don't have that repetition, but that helps them learn verbal sequencing and how to tell a sequence of events. So, how do they tell about their day? It just helps them learn what happens next. And at times I would also point to the written word to help them focus on that printed material. It boosts their social skills too when they read with you as parents. So, okay, let me check on how we're doing on our time.
We're doing fine.
Okay. Okay. Play is the child's work. So this is how they learn. They learn through their play. They learn when they play with other kids, by themselves. Once again, you want to do a lot of that self-talk. So talk about what you are doing, talk about what the child is doing, play with the toys, and just follow the child's lead and talk about what's going on. And once again, try to reduce commands and questions. I have a speech therapist friend who gives her parents a little activity to try at home, to play with their child for 5 or 10 minutes without asking one question or giving any commands, like, put the doll in the bed. Oh no, let's put it in this bed. Just talk about what you're doing and model language. And it's harder than you would think because it just doesn't make sense to us as adults all the time. So the next thing I want to mention also seems like a no-brainer: music. So what happens when we sing songs with kids and play songs to kids and they're singing along is they use a different part of their brain to learn language. Music is also very repetitive, so it helps it stick because they're saying it again and again. But beyond that, it also helps them learn syllable patterns. That beat is already set. So if they've got a song, now I'm blanking on a song I can use for an example, but a song about a banana, it's got a beat to it. Or monkeys on the bed. All those little words are sort of preset in there. And it's almost like saying, say this with me, because they're following the pattern of the music, and it has word patterns, syllable patterns, sound patterns. It helps them accurate speech sound use. So we sort of tend to underestimate the power of music with our kids, but it's a very good technique. So, and it's more fun than, can you say this with me? No, they're going to say it with the song and they will do it that way. So just to kind of summarize, this is kind of a silly way to sort of remember some of these things, but I always say B, blab. B for blab, talking. So you're going to be talking, you're going to be modeling language, and that's just so important with our kids. The second B, B. The second B is books, reading with your kids, of course. The next one is B, sort of standing for bubbles, or playing with your kids. And remember that combining actions with words, and remember just play with the kids and talk about what you're doing while you're playing. And then the other thing down at the bottom is sort of put the kibosh on all the questions and commands that we tend to use with kids when we're talking to them or trying to get them to talk to us. Okay, so those are just sort of some suggestions on getting your kids talking more. I have a few other things that I want to talk about in the next few minutes. One, and I told you I would tell you about articulation development, but one is, how do we get kids to talk more clearly if we're not understanding their speech or if they're not using speech sounds accurately? So the first thing would be emphasize sounds that your child is missing. So if they're saying ta for cup or ka for cup, obviously you're going to go cup. Yep, there's your cup. I wouldn't be direct with young children and say, can you say cup? I would just model it a few times correctly. And oftentimes they will imitate it not always correctly, but hopefully it will get better. So emphasize, or if you say, oh yeah, mouse, and they say mout or something like that, say it again, mouse. That's right, there's a little mouse. So you're emphasizing that sound. Another thing that works really well is sounds that are visible, and they're having a hard time saying. You might hold a toy up to your face, and that gets them kind of focused on your face and focused on your mouth. So you can say, right, a fox, it's a little fox. It gets them looking at you. Tapping out the syllables is similar to what we were talking about with music. So I always, to see if kids can sequence sounds, I always have them say Lightning McQueen, which is a really hard one, but you might go Lightning McQueen, or tap those syllables to help them do it, or even use a little drum or something like that. Really helps them. Banana, that really helps them get the syllable structure in there rather than just nana. Lime McQueen, running it all together. With older kids, you can be a little bit more direct. You can directly correct them sometimes, or have them repeat it after you. But if they don't want to do that, I would just back off a little bit and model it. Start with the sound by itself. Like if they're not doing, say, an S sound, start with snake sound, not in a word where it's going to be habit and it's going to be harder for them. So just start with the sounds and do that a lot until they can do that. And then it will more easily transfer into words, if that makes sense. So the last thing is understanding what errors are normal for your child's age. So I get so many questions from parents with a maybe 2 or 3 year old saying, oh, they can't say their R sound, which is okay. So here's some very general guidelines for normal speech development. Some of those websites have some good information on that. And so by age 3, you're going to want them to have the F, P, B, N, M, H, W. I like them to have the D and the T too, but you see different things with, you'll see different guidelines, but this is very, very general, and you can see the things that are later sounds. By age 6, even S's and Z's, kids might have a little lisp before that, where they put their tongue forward. Some research says L's by age 6. I like to see those L's earlier at age 5. K's and G's are one that kids make errors on a lot. That's a 4-year-old sound. They'll often, before that, like at 3, they'll often do a D for a G and a T for a K. So they'll say, I'm done a do didn't a tar. And that's pretty normal, but it's kind of hard to understand at times. So anyway, so that's a little information about speech. So the last 2 things I just want to mention a little bit about, I said I was going to talk a little bit about screen time. And just to sort of give a little background, screen time tends to decrease the child's, I'm going to skip here. No. Okay, communication skills. This is a really good thing. Communication skills are dependent on social interaction. It's an active process of talking, listening, playing, reading. It's not a passive process of looking at a screen. So screen time has been shown to decrease children's attention, their play skills, their social skill development, and their expressive language skills. And we're talking about excessive screen time, not appropriate use of screen time, but it's easy to sort of get down that path and do more and more with the technology and the screen time. It's disruptive to their sleep, their ability to self-regulate or kind of self-soothe themselves, and also their time spent being active. So the American Academy of Pediatric guidelines are, first of all, to set limits. So they're saying no screen time under 2 years, and then gradually increase it up to 5 years for to no more than an hour a day by 5. The next thing is be an example. So there's been some research that parents on screens and phones, that is as a disruptive to the child's attention and social skills as the child's screen time. So wow, that is sort of breathtaking to me. That was sort of took me back when I first read that. Screen-free meal time is one of their recommendations. sharing screen time when you can with your kids. So you're talking and you're making an interaction time, and then avoiding the use of a device to calm kids. So the only thing that I would like to add to their guidelines and things are, as parents, don't beat yourself up. There are days when you need to attend to another child or don't have adult support or have household responsibilities that have to be done. And these guidelines aren't there to instill guilt. They are just be aware of the need to limit screen time, find alternatives when possible, and gradually reduce the screen time if you think your child's getting too much. So, okay, I can say I have a couple more minutes, Betsy, or no?
Yes, we'll ask questions as soon as you're done.
Okay, because
We'll
I
take
do wanted
questions,
to just say a couple of things about masks and social distancing and their effect on speech and language. So the bottom line, I've done some research on this, and the bottom line is basically that kids are adaptive and they'll do fine as long as they are getting a lot of face-to-face interactions with parents, with others in their household, their siblings. There's also, this is a little random, but there was a 2012 study way before COVID that children are able to read facial emotions with masks as well as unmasked. So I thought that was interesting. But there are three areas that may be impacted by masks as well as social distancing. In the same way, social distancing affects kids almost in the exact same way that wearing a mask does. So first of all, there's social skills. That probably concerns me the most because they'll become less tuned in to, facial expressions and unable to read facial emotions, or, I guess that's my worry, that they interpreting social cues to process emotions and things like that, even facial recognition. I just wonder if eye gaze and eye contact won't decrease over time. The second area is auditory skills, listening and attention. So kids who have more difficulty with listening skills or poor attention, or they tend to be stronger visual learners who really rely on visual cues to interpret language, might struggle a little bit. Listening and background noise is always harder for those kind of kids, and they rely on those visual cues to interpret language. So that might be really difficult for them. And the last area is articulation. And that's, I know, the one that I think Betsy was kind of asking about, and sound discrimination. So masks attenuate sound by 3 to 12 decibels. Also, there's some low filtering of high frequency sounds with a mask. And then you're adding in that aspect of social distancing. So you've got people who are farther away. So you take, for example, high frequency sounds are like F, like in fox, or S, like in sun. And that sound might be missing in words, or you might confuse those two sounds. And then you're also taking away the visual cue for a F versus a S. So it could possibly impact their articulation, learning, phonemic development. The one last thing that I wanted to say about that is just, what can we do as teachers, as parents? And there's just a few things that really will help. So one is slowing down our rates so that you, just a little, to allow a little more time for kids to process the information. Another one is to get their attention before talking to them, making sure you've got them looking at you, say their name. Don't talk over background noise, because that really makes it difficult for them. And then exaggerating your gestures. So those are going to be the cues that they tune into. Your gestures, your intonation pattern of your voice, that will help them too. So if you exaggerate that a little, and even your facial expressions, because that will show up in your eyes, and that's what they'll be reading. So those are ways we can help make it better. But last not least, as much face time as possible. So when you're home, really spend some time talking and interacting in face-to-face time. So the last thing I wanted to add is just, if you have concerns, they're going to put some numbers up on the with the website and information to contact these places. But birth to 3, early intervention, 3 to 5 years, child find program. They have screening for kids, evaluation, they provide therapy and preschool programs. So those are ways that you can get your child, if you have concerns and they don't seem to be meeting the milestones, feel, that just jump right into that, because it's certainly not going to hurt them and will probably help. So thank you. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys have.
Okay, well, thank you so much. As always, that's a ton of information to process and very helpful. We do have one question, and please add your questions, everyone, into the Q&A box. Our first question is, does screen time include TV shows?
Yes.
Short answer.
Yes.
Oh, if you wanted to stop sharing your screen, you could.
Oh, yeah. Sure enough.
No. Let's see.
That's better.
Okay, another question we have is, do you have any tips on raising bilingual babies? How should you focus on both language? This mom says, I just can't seem to balance, and I feel my son's learning one language more than another.
Okay, I do. And I actually have a slide like that I skipped over just because I wasn't sure if anybody would have. I was going to wait and see if we had questions, but I definitely do. So first of all, kids, if we test them, kids who are learning dual languages, if we test them in one language, of course, it's going to seem like they're behind. But if you test them in both languages, they are kids who don't have an underlying language problem anyway, are going to test average. It does not impact. So being bilingual or learning 2 languages does not cause a language delay. So that's the first thing I want to really make clear. And hold on, I just want to find my notes because I have some good information on bilingual. But so I would, I hear this mom saying she's trying to, try to keep exposing to both languages. Almost always when kids get to be about 3 or 4, they stop using the parent's native language and they start using English. And it is across the board with almost every language. I hear it all the time. Parents complain about that, and the child will only use English, probably because they're seeing other children, they're getting more of the English. The best way really is just keep talking to them in your language. Consistency, though, tends to be the key. So that's really the most important thing. So if, say, one parent is speaking their native language, the other parent speaking English, or if both parents are speaking the other language, the child's getting English from, say, books, story time, TV shows, or if there are certain books that you read in one language and a certain show you watch in another, but they tend to lag a little bit when parents are mixing it up all the time and sort of combining, both languages, and they figure it out eventually. But if they're mixing it up a lot, it takes them a little bit longer to get it figured out. But stick with it. Keep talking to them. Keep using your language and don't give up.
Linda, could you just expand a little bit on what counts and what doesn't count as screen time, because there's still some confusion, and what about like FaceTiming with grandparents?
Oh yeah, you got to just take that out of it. And I was even going to mention that with these COVID times, it kind of puts some of these rules down the tubes, because oh yeah, FaceTime with those grandparents, you've got to have that interaction. And I think FaceTiming is a little bit more considered in that face-to-face interaction realm than it is technology or screen time. And then you've also got the situation of a lot of kids, even preschoolers, being online for school. So take that out of the mix completely. And for screen time, I consider watching videos, being on a tablet, watching TV, all those things I would consider screen time.
Our parenting strategy series will resume in January. On Tuesday, January 19th, we'll have a presentation from Safe Care Colorado about how to ensure a safe home environment. Now that so many of us are spending so much time at home, it might be good to revisit that. And meanwhile, if you do have any questions about early childhood issues, don't hesitate to use our Ask a Librarian service and reach out to Child and Family Library Services librarians, because we can help point you in the right direction and get you the information that you need. Thank you so much. You covered a wide range of topics. Very helpful.
Great. Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.